I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Okay, we're back, and what a delight to have back in the studio with us today Dr. Dan Tomlinson. He's a physician, and he's a writer, he's an author, he's a speaker, he's kind of a preacher, he just won't admit it. And he's actually given birth to a nation. 6,000 babies? You've delivered 6,000 babies?
You know, my book says 6,000, Perry, but I have to correct that because that book was written in '04. Now it's 7,000.
7,000.
It's about 200 a year, so you add 1,000 every decade.
There you go. Well, you've given birth to a nation. His book we want to talk about today is called Birth Pains, and you may want to get a copy of this. They can still get it where?
You can get it at Evangel, at any internet site.
Okay.
You know, I'm not a famous preacher or doctor, so you can't just go into Barnes & Noble anywhere in Los Angeles or anything and find that. But it's, you know, it's a published book, so it's available on the internet. It's
called Birth Pains, P-A-N-G-S, and How Pregnancy Reveals God's Plan for the Ages. Now, you saw the allegory as a result of your career of delivering babies.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then you finally sat down and put it into a book. When back before you ever wrote the book were you beginning to feel and see the relationship here?
You know, I've been going to a churchgoer for a long time. And, you know, preachers are up there talking about end times and things. But, you know, they don't do girl things like I do. They don't think of pregnancy. But I'm seeing in the late 90s and early 2000s, to answer your question, but, you know, pregnancy is intense, delivery is dramatic, and God uses the Bible, in the Bible, there's all kinds of references to the joy of the birth, the travail of the labor, because it's so intense, it's such a life event. And here I was, you know, interested in end times events, and I see the story in Mark 13 and Matthew 24 about how Jesus compares the world, the things that are happening in the world, to the beginning of sorrows. You know, there'd be wars and rumors of wars and pestilences and earthquakes and famines, and Luke adds that the oceans would rage. And then he says these are the beginning of sorrows. He's throwing a labor term out on these guys. And then you see in other places where Paul's saying that, you know, there'll be peace and safety. The day of the Lord will be like peace and safety. But then sudden destruction comes upon them, as travail as a woman and child. And then Jeremiah tells us in 30 that the time of Jacob's trouble, speaking of the tribulation time frame, will be a time when men are grabbing their loins like a woman in travail. It's like, wow, there's all this labor stuff all throughout the Bible. And so you see in these different segments of God's plan for the ages, it fits just like a pregnancy.
Wow. It deals with what would be called signs of the times or end times.
Right.
And what I find so interesting, Dr. Dan, is we're dealing with all the headlines today, you know, and we're all just kind of, our boat's been rocked pretty good with Supreme Court decisions. I find it interesting, there's so many natural disasters going on around the world that's not making news, and yet that's very biblical, isn't it?
It's totally biblical. Think of, you know, birth pangs, like when you had your kids. Boy, you know, she was uncomfortable for weeks, for months before she actually delivered. You know, things were happening. She might wake you up and say, you know, Perry, I think we might need to go in, or maybe you went in. And the nurses said, no, it's not time. Well, you know, the world's been doing the same thing, if you will. Paul talked about how all of creation travaileth and groaneth until now, waiting to be delivered, if you will. That was written 2,000 years ago, and since that time we've had birth pangs. We had the bubonic plague. We had the 100 Years' War. You know, there's always been birth pangs, but then in this last century, just like birth pangs that are ramping up, there's been more wars as population has grown, and people who study earthquakes say that it's logarithmically increased, just like birth pangs increase at the ends. Famines, you know, there's always been famines, but now 1/3 of the population of the world is starving to death, and you know, oceans raging with tsunamis and the thing in Indonesia. So just, you know, Gaza Strip war, you know, on and on, Entebbe, you know, Munich Olympics, Supreme Court, whatever it is, it's all setting us up for that delivery, if you will.
Where does in your writings and your thinking, where does Israel, the rebirth of Israel, play into the sequence of signs?
Well, people studying this always had problem until 1948 because Israel wasn't a nation. It was irrelevant. It was a podunk place.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, if you will, like in Ezekiel's prophecy about the dry bones coming back and having form, Israel became a nation. It became a nation in one day. And so now all the prophecies about Israel are like the timetable starting again. As Jesus said, learn a parable of the fig tree. The fig tree in the Bible is always Israel. That when you see after the long winter, if you will, the 2,000 years of their irrelevance, not being a nation, you see the fig tree budding. No, my coming is near, even at the door. Well, the fig tree is budded. There's no fruit yet. They don't believe in Christ. They have no fruit, but there's leaves on the tree, if you will. Since 1948, over 60 years, Israel's been a nation. It says the same thing in Ezekiel 37, where it says the dry bones coming back, so Israel's a real player in end times eschatology.
Part of that eschatology is that the whole world would turn against her. Did you ever think in our lifetime we'd see our country take a position against Israel?
I know. No. Because we have so many people of Jewish ancestry living here that are in power positions, but the tide has certainly turned, hasn't it? You have oil and the pressure to keep our oil-hungry nation flowing, and so we've befriended the enemies of Israel, if you will. And God says that He'll bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you, and we're cursing our nation by leaving Israel and leaving their side.
I want to come back to that, but there's the trimesters of the birth process.
Sure.
And I would assume you think we're in the third trimester.
We're late in the third trimester.
Late in the third trimester.
Yeah, Jesus said that there'll be these things, these signs happening. But He told those men that 2,000 years ago because they were looking for Him to come as the birth, if you will, then. He says, no, that's not my mission now. My mission is to, I'm dying for the sins of the world. I'm Isaiah 53 in it. And all those prophecies about the glory are later. That was the beginning of the third trimester. When those two angels came to those men of Galilee and said, you men of Galilee, this Jesus who you just saw ascend up to heaven, He's going to come back in like manner. That was the beginning of the third trimester. And just like when I have a baby, a woman in the third trimester, she can deliver any time. The Lord could have come back any time. But it's the fullness of time. It's the due date. Or in our case now, I think we're after the due date that He's going to come back.
So where would you have put the rebirth of Israel in 1948? Would that have been the beginning of the third trimester?
No. This is late in the third trimester.
Okay.
Indeed, God's ways are over our ways.
Yeah.
He knows. No one knows the day or the hour. I would not at all presume to say I know that it's going to be such and such a day. I just think that we're in the times and the seasons.
Right.
And so I'm in this allegory. If you look at biblical history back to Adam, you have 6,000 years from now. 4,000 years of the Old Testament neatly fit into the first and second trimesters. There's no potential to birth the baby, but the woman has birth pangs the whole pregnancy. There's always contractions. We see them even in the first trimester when we do ultrasounds, but no potential for the birth, which is of course the second coming, the most intense and dramatic event that a woman would ever experience, and so secondarily her husband, is the most intense and dramatic event that's going to happen to the world. As you read the book of Revelation, there's going to be blood up to the horse's mane. It's bloody, it's messy, just like a birth. And then, of course, after the birth, there's the joy that follows. That will be the millennial kingdom.
All right. This is fantastic. Look, this is no easy reading, and it's great. It's one of the most powerful allegories. I have this book at home and have gone through it many times. I read it and I put it down. I go, and I read it and I put it down.
I tell people to read it like a devotional because they're short chapters.
Yeah.
And you're right, they're deep. They've got a Bible in every chapter.
Yeah. Anyway, get a copy of it. Dr. Dan Tomlinson. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. I'm going to ask him this. One of the big parts of birth is the breaking of the water.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
What does that have to do with anything? We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with our good friend Dr. Dan Tomlinson. We're talking about the first book he wrote called Birth Pains. And I told him I wanted to come back and talk about this book because, boy, if it's ever relevant.
It's really
today.
relevant.
It's very relevant today. You can go to Dr. Dan's book, .com and get it. Look for it at Amazon. But let me encourage you, get a copy of this book. And he's absolutely correct. A lot of little chapters in there. You can read a chapter a day or a couple a day and be on your way to see the allegory between a woman who is pregnant, about ready to give birth, and the coming of the Lord. And there certainly is a lot of that to it. We just can't. I think we'd have to have our head in the sand to ignore the signs today.
Right, but you know, us humans are good at denial.
Yeah.
Look at the Pharisees, or Israel, when Christ first came. You know, they had this prophecy in Daniel 9 that it'd be 483 years, 69 weeks of 7 years, until the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah. They knew it was right then. That's why when they were asking John, "Are you the Messiah?" There was Messiah watch going on like crazy, and yet they said, "No, you're not the one." They totally missed it, and caused Jesus to weep over the city.
Yeah. All right. The various trimesters of birth, there's 3 of them. You're saying we're late in the 3rd trimester.
Right. The Old Testament is the 1st and 2nd trimester.
Okay.
We're late in the 3rd now.
Okay, late in the 3rd. So, where is the water breaking, and what is that?
Well, look at the pregnancy. You're late in the 3rd trimester. The woman's just going along. She doesn't know it's peace and safety, and then sudden destruction comes upon them as a woman in travail. Well, a woman goes from false labor to true labor, the time of intense labor, the time, the book of Revelation, if you will, 6 through 19, after the water breaks. Well, now I'm a pre-trib rapture person. I think we're saved from the wrath to come. That chapters 4 and 5 of the book of Revelation come before chapters 6 through 19. So I think it fits. Just like Lot was taken out of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a picture of the tribulation time frame before the fires came down. Noah was put in the ark before the flood hit. So the water breaks before real labor, just like the rapture hits before the tribulation. So the breaking of the water is the rapture, the most unique, unexpected event in a woman's pregnancy. She's going around, she's in the shower, in the store, in the shower, and the water breaks. That's what's going to be. Two men are at 2 women in the field, two men in the mill. One is taken, one is left. That's the water breaking. It's unique, it's unexpected, and then intense labor starts after that. And just like after the Holy Spirit is taken out of the world, because we believers will be taken out, it says then the man of perdition is revealed. Or in chapter 6 of the book of Revelation, the first horseman of the apocalypse, the one who comes in, the man of peace, and says, "I've got the solution. I've got the solution for the problem in Israel. We'll get the Arabs and the Jews together, and the world will initially embrace them, just like they embrace the first horseman of the apocalypse. But then the second horseman comes in."
I've always, and I don't know how this fits in your book, but you're obviously a student of the Word. I've often thought, all right, the rapture takes place and all of these millions of people are gone.
Yeah.
How can the world just carry on?
It's going to be tough. That's why they're going to need somebody. What happened in Nazi Germany, I think, is a real prefigure of what's going to happen in the future. After World War I, Germany was in a deep depression, and then the depression, then the worldwide depression hit anyway, and so they were ripe to take on this person that just took the reins of everything, and that's what the world will do. Today, no one would let somebody do what Antichrist is going to do, but when America becomes irrelevant because we're gone, and places in Europe and other, it's going to be chaos.
All right, let's go to the social decline of America. It seems to be...
that's certainly one of the signs.
At a rate we've never, ever dreamed of. And now it was accelerated to full throttle this past week.
Sure. Well, Jesus said that this was going to happen. He says that, and Paul told us that too, that people's love would grow cold in the end. But what you're talking about, of course, is the days of Noah and the days of Lot. Jesus said that the times of the end would be like the days of Noah. If you look at Noah, there was a population explosion. People multiplied on the face of the earth. Violence filled the earth. That's certainly happening. People were thinking of evil continually. And then it says that the daughters of God and the sons of men intermarried. There was some sexual thing going on there. And then, of course, the days of Lot. There's always been the alternate lifestyle. We don't call it that now. We call what it used to be called, but now we say alternate lifestyle because we want to be, appropriate. But, sodomy wasn't something that was celebrated in the world until now. and in the days of Sodom. And so that's the thing that we have going on now with the days of Lot, is that alternative lifestyle is once again celebrated. The White House is, all rainbows and everything. I can't help but think Abraham Lincoln was turning in his grave on that one. Mm-hmm. So just what Jesus said is happening, that these signs would be in play just like the days of Noah and just like the days of Lot. So we shouldn't be surprised.
Where does Christian persecution tie into birth pains?
Oh, wow. Well, Revelation chapter, I believe, 6 or 7, where it talks about that the martyrs are under the altar during that time, saying, how long, O Lord, how long? It's just ramping up more and more. There's been persecutions from the days of Hadrian, back in the Roman times, and on, and with Hitler and his thing, and then of course now, that our brothers and sisters, that we don't, you're way more aware of this than I am, being a news person, but it's terrible, and it's only going to get more and more, and we really have to be prepared. I think we're going to be pulled out before the tribulation time frame, but it says in Revelation chapter 7 that there'll be multitudes coming out of the tribulation clothed in white from all the nations of the world that will become believers, that they're going to see us leave. They're going to have books like Birth Pangs and The Late Great Planet Earth and whatever, and they're going to go, wow, those Christians were right, and they're going to believe in the Lord Jesus. And the tribulation time frame, that's one of its purposes, is to call people back home.
This recent decision with the Supreme Court, all of them, the last 5 decisions come out, shows that we have a court now. We're in constitutional crisis, bottom line. We're in a constitutional crisis. But the big decision, recognizing same-sex marriage, it has split the church down the middle. I'm reading all of these various things, and there are churches saying we need to go along with this and reach out. There are those, it's an abomination. Is this the separating of the wheat and the tares?
I don't know. This has been, my approach is looking at Jesus, but Jesus is a twofold guy. Remember when they came to him and said, Jesus, they beheaded your cousin John, and Jesus didn't go, oh, let's go get Herod. I've got the power. I can call 12 legions of angels. Let's just kill him. No, they withdrew into the wilderness, and so Jesus is going, I'm not going to be super political. I know my Father's got it under control. I see these things as part of the end time scenario. And certainly, this is totally, so you have people that, that some of the church will say, well, John and Joe, they love each other, and love is good. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, God doesn't approve of it because it ruins the type of the family. Mm-hmm. You have a husband and a wife and a child. God's into having children. And if you have same-sex marriage, you don't have a family. And I kind of get this. But it isn't, God's not going to go for it. But I'm not going to jump in and go, I'm going to love them and let God judge them. I know what's going on, and I can step back because I'm a second coming guy, and I'm not a news guy like you are. So I'm just going, I get it, and I'm going to look at Jesus Christ and Him crucified as the center of the picture. I know that the picture out here is blurred, and I'm pretty sure God doesn't approve of it, but I'm going to love these people and let God judge them.
Okay. That's fine. I wasn't looking for your personal thought.
I know, but
that's fine.
I couldn't help it.
My concern is that let me go forward and come back. You've written 2 other books on the Emmaus Road.
On the Road to Emmaus, Seeing Jesus in the Old Testament.
Okay, Seeing Jesus in the Old Testament.
That's my newest
By the way,
one.
you can go to drdansbooks.com and get that. And the other one?
My other book is A Woman's Silent Testimony, How Pregnancy Enlivens Biblical Truths. And it's a book of 8 allegories, short allegories. One of my favorites is The Medical and Spiritual Treatments of Depression. And a second favorite is The Parallels Between Fetal and Earthly Life. And I go around and talk about those 2 essays a lot. And I have a little ministry for vacationing pastors, especially in smaller churches. And that's a real love of mine right now.
All right. So what's your message to the church?
Got to keep our eyes open. The Lord's coming back, and it's going to be soon. So we want to keep the main thing. Be generous to people. Wake up and smell the roses and be thankful. And don't worry about our portfolios and and our golf game so much, because the end is near. And I don't want to be like those, like we alluded to before, the people that caused Jesus to weep over the city because they didn't recognize the time of their visitation. Because we are just like that first century group of people that, you know, a portion of the church, and I appreciate you so much, because is not even aware that the labor is about to happen. We're steaming toward labor, and people aren't even aware. Just like Paul said, sudden destruction will come upon them like travail of a woman and child. And they're saying peace and safety.
Just I'm trying to figure out, are you putting the end harvest or the end revival after the rapture, or is there one before the rapture?
Could be either.
Okay.
I think there's both.
Okay.
Yeah, just like the Welsh revival back in the early last century, you know, as people, you know, confess Jesus, you know, in public and forsake sin, God's going to honor that, and there's going to be revival.
Romans talked about, and so does Corinthians, I think even Ephesians, talked about the rulers of the world, and I'm paraphrasing here, the rulers of the world, in all of their knowledge, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem, I mean, if we get two questions here at the Dove, Dr. Dan, it's these two questions. What is truth, and who can I trust?
Right.
The whole world is out of control. There is no leader out there that has the answers. In fact, they're all plastic.
You know, Psalm 5 said that, why did the heathen rage? And Psalm 137 talks about the judges. It calls them gods, but they're really judges, the supremes, if you will, that they do the wrong things. Read Psalm 37 today. It's exactly what happened at the Supreme Court last week. And God is just, he has them in derision, because they think they have knowledge and they don't. But the definition of truth, I have a good definition for truth, and that is what is consistent with the character, glory, and will of God. That's truth. When Jesus said to Pilate, you know, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, truth is whatever is consistent with the character, will, and glory of God.
The Bible.
The Bible.
Okay.
Things that are pure and
the
lovely
person you
and
can
true
trust
and
is Christ.
Just. Right, because he's the Word of God.
Yeah, wow. What's next?
You know, I'm in a season of preaching and teaching, and I'm not in a writing season now. But I really feel that the Lord's calling me, as I kind of end my career as a deliverer, to get out and talk about Christ.
Well, I just want to say to vacationing pastors, or if you want Dan to come in and do a seminar in your church or speak to your group, that's what he's feel called to do. And I would really encourage you to take the time and the effort to get a hold of him. How do they do that? DrDanTomlinson.com. So, and it's DR. It's not doctor, the long spelling. So it's DrDansBooks.com or Dr. Dan Tomlinson, DrDanTomlinson.com. All right, I would encourage you to get a hold of him and have him come to your organization, your group, or pastors, if you're going away for maybe a little holiday or something, give Dan. You can trust your pulpit with him. He's not going to say anything heretical. If he's going to do anything, he's going to set your church on fire. My problem is I just have so much content that I have to parrot it down. As you can tell by just listening to me, you know, my mind's working so fast I can't get all the words out. You do a great job. Get this book. Get it and read it. Birth Pains, How Pregnancy Reveals God's Plan for the Ages by Dr. Dan Tomlinson, and you can go to drdansbooks.com and order it, and then there make the contact and maybe have him come and speak to your people. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, and Perry. God bless you, pal. I'm glad you put the sense of urgency into it. We just cannot ignore the signs of the day. No, they're there, and the devil would love us to be distracted and discouraged, and no. We can't do that. We have exciting times ahead of us. This is a wonderful time to be alive. Great. See you next time on Focus Today.